It was supposed to be a regular summit. The Global Leadership Forum in Geneva had drawn presidents, ministers, scholars, and media from all over the world. Cameras flashed. Every seat was filled. Tension hung in the air. Then Donald Trump stood up. The U.S. president, invited as a special guest, looked annoyed. He turned sharply toward a tall, composed figure across the room. Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. Some leaders, Trump said with a smirk, are just too bold for their own good. They talked big, but forget who built world order. A few nervous chuckles dot the camera, zoomed in on Traoré. Hadn't blinked, didn't smile. He just stared back, calm and still. The room felt colder. Reporters stopped typing. African delegates lowered their eyes. And somewhere in the back, a little Burkina girl watching the broadcast room. Her village clutched her radio tweeter. Trump leaned back, clearly satisfied. But Trey slowly stood. Hadn't shout, he didn't frown. He simply said, "Let me tell you a story." And at that moment, you could hear a pin drop. No one knew. He was about to change history. "My story," Trey began, his voice calm, "does not begin with power. It begins with silence." He stepped away from the mic stand, hands behind his back. "I was born in Ireland, where rain was a prayer and silence was survival." A photo of a dusty village in Burkina Faso appeared on the summit screen. A kid sat barefoot in front of a broken well. No clean water, no electricity. "That was me, age 6. Traoré," said my mother. "Walked 10 kilometers just to Fendris. My father taught math under a tree." The room stared. "I was bold," he continued, "not because I wanted power, but because I had to carry my brother on me back when he fainted from hunger. A lump formed in someone's throat. You call that too bold? Then let me ask, what should I have done? Waited for permission to feed my people." He looked directly at Trump now. "I didn't come to this summit for applause. I came for justice." A woman in the audience quietly wiped her eyes. And far away, across oceans and time zones, that same little girl in Burkina Faso whispered, "Speak for us." The auditorium remained frozen. Traoré walked over to a massive world map projected behind him. He pointed to Africa. "You see this map," he said. "Half of our rivers don't have names on your charts. Our minerals are labeled but not our mothers. Our heroes are shadows in your textbooks." He turned to face the audience. "When I speak of African dignity, I am not old. I am remembering the names too old forgot." He zoomed in on Burkina Faso. Small, landlocked, and surrounded. For decades, we were told to wait. Wait for help. Wait for aid. Wait for aid. Wait for permission. But the children dying of hunger didn't have time to wait. Trump shifted in his seat. Trump paused. His voice dropped. "Sir, when you call me too bold, I ask you, what would you do if your people drank from mud? If your soldiers had to fix broken roads before fighting? If your youth were leaving, not to chase dreams, but to escape nightmares?" Silence again. Then a voice from the back whispered, "He's not speaking politics. He's speaking truth." But the world had no idea. Traoré hadn't even started. The storm was on the beginning. Traoré paused. He took a breath and looked down as if remembering zooming far away. "My mother used to cook 1 pot of rice," he said quietly, "and feed 8 of us." The room leaned in. "She would eat last only if there was anything left. One day when I was 10, there wasn single quotes. T. He wiped his hand slowly across theatable, as if brushing memory dust away. "I watched her give her portion to me, sister. Then she sat outside, holding her stomach, pretending she wasn't hungry." The camera caught a tear quietly sliding down a delegate's cheek. "I promised myself," Traoré said, "if Eva had a voice, I would use it for women like her. Women who didn't speak English, women who never traveled. Bhutto knew what real sacrifice meant." He turned to Trump. "You had gold plates. My mother had rusted spoons." A silence heavier than steel spread across the hall. One journalist whispered, "He's not defending himself. He's defending every voiceless person." And far away, that same little girl in Burkina Faso whispered again, "Keep going." Traoré gestured and a photo appeared behind him. A cracked field, a collapsed water pump, and a circle of children crying. "This," he said softly, was the day our well gave out. I was 13. We had no clean water for 5 days. He stepped closer to the screen. I remember carrying a jerry can with moccasin, 10 kilometers on foot. When we got towed nearest pump, the water was warm, brown, and smelled like rust, but we drank it. A collective gasp spread through the room. My cousin got sicklitter that night. He didn't wake up. Traoré looked up. I held his hand until it went cold. That was the first time he learned what the world calls collateral damage. He turned sharply. You say I am too bold. Then you have never carried death in a plastic container. The hall was silent. A young intern, Athback, covered her face with her hands. An African delegate bit his lip, visibly shaking, and still Traoré had not raised his voice. Not once, but the storm in his words was already flooding hearts. There's something else, Traoré said, holding up a charred object trapped in plastic. This is my first mouth textbook. Gasps again. The camera zoomed in. The edges were black and curled, pages brittle from fire. It was all I had. I used to sleep with it under my shirt, afraid it would be stolen. One night, our house caught fire from a neighbor's kerosene lamp. My cloths burned. The roof fell in. He touched his arm gently, where a faint scar still ran. But I ran back into Theflams to save this book. A long pause backers. I knew that, without knowledge, we would never be free. Somewhere in that crowd, a professor stood quietly, then another and another. No words, just respect. I am bold, Traoré said slowly, because fire couldn't stop me. Hunger couldn't stop me. Silence didn't scare him. Then he looked again at Trump. Butte arrogance, that only wakes me up. Petodians didn't cheer. They sat in stunned silence, facing not just a man, but a mirror, and far away. That little girl smiled with tears in her eyes. She had hope now. Trump looked away from Trump for a moment. He turned toward Thodians and smiled softly. Sadly, do you know why I joined the army? People leaned in. It wasn't because I loved guns. It was because of one soldier who walked into my village with books in his backpack. The screen changed again. A faded image. A young African soldier kneeling beside 2 children, handing them notebooks. He was tired, dusty, bleeding slightly from his shoulder. Both sat on a stone and began teaching multiplication under a neem tree. Traoré paused. That was the first man Eva saw who fought with one hand and educated with the other. He raised his hand and whispered. He died the next day. A tremor passed through the crowd. I buried him with the children. We didn't have a coffin, just wrapped him in the national flag and promised we'd remember. He turned to the world leaders. Don't you talk about bravery and politics. You talk about bravery and silence. The kind that gets no headlines. He looked directly at Trump. Again, I didn't become a soldier to kill. I became one so our children could read in peace. A photo slowly faded onto the John screen. It was a boy barefoot standing in dirt. One of his feet was wrapped in a melted plastic bottle shaped like ashu. This is Amadou, Trump said gently. He lived in a village near Dori. He walked 5 miles to school every day with one shoe, made from a Fanta bottle, gasped Sichode. I met him when I was doing a treach as a young lieutenant. I asked him why he kept coming back to school even when he had no shoes. The audience waited, he said. Because I want to write a letter to the president one day, but I don't know how to spell yet. The hall was so silent, you could hear Thebus of the Mike Amadou died of malaria 3 weeks later. He never wrote that letter. Traoré clenched his fist. That's why I challenged the West. Not because I hate the Dunyan, but because I loved a boy who dreamed beyond his circumstances and Thord let him die. One journalist couldn't stop crying. Another lowered his camera in shame, and somewhere in Burkina Faso, a little girl closed her eyes, whispering, "Tell them everything." Trump stepped back from the screen. From inside his jacket, he pulled out a folded piece of paper. Yellowed, torn. This, he said, is a letter I wrote when I was 15. I wrote it to the president's of a major Western country. Gasps filled the air. People sat forward in their seats. I begged for help, not for money, but for textbooks, mosquito tunnets, and chalk for our village school. He opened it slowly. Carefully, I sent it through a journalist who said he had a connection. I waited every week, every month. Nothing ever came. He held up the paper. They never read it, but I kept it to remind myself that Nikhil should have to beg to be seen. Trump looked away, expression unreadable. Now Trey continued, I don't write letters anymore. I lead and I speak. Because silence is what kills people. He turned his eyes to the camera, millions watching. Some of you in power ignored letters like these. But today, EOM, the voice that no paper could carry. People across the globe began The letter had finally been read by the world. Traoré raised his hand gently, as if recalling a memory too sharp to touch. One night he began. Our village clinical was powered. It was 2007. Rain was falling hard. A pregnant woman named Esau had arrived after walking hours through flooded paths. She was bleeding. Traoré said voiced. The midwife had no light, no medicine. The only generator we had run out of fuel. The room held its breath. I ran 2 miles in the storm with a plastic bottle to borrow fuel from a nearby compound. But by the time I got back, his voice cracked, just slightly. The baby didn't make it. As Niffle echoed from the crowd, and SO2, she never spoke again. She just stared at the ceiling for days, weeks. Traoré looked at Trump. You want to talk about boldness? How bold does a woman have to be to carry life into death? Insolence. He stepped closer to the mic. He became bold because I could no longer carry the weight of Graves. No applause, just a heavy sound of humanity waking up and across the world. Someone watching whispered, I've never cried during a summit until now. The next slide lit up. A black and white image of 5 young men in old military uniforms, standing with wooden rifles. These were freedom fighters. Traoré said my grandfather among them. They fought colonial forces with nothing but karats. They slept in forests, atteroots, bled in silence. Their names, you've never heard them. He pointed tough. Last man on the right. That's Captain Bouba. He died in 1962. A grenade tore his arm off. But he kept leading until his last breath. Traoré's voice was steady, but a storm brewed in his eyes. You call me too bold? Then maybe you never met a man who fought with one arm and still smiled at children passing by. He paused. These men weren't perfect, but they believed in something greater than themselves. He looked across the sea of faces. Some ashamed, some white-eyed. I don't wear this uniform for power. Hesed, hand on his chest. I wear it for those who were buried without names, and for those still fighting. Without recognition, he let the silence settle. My boldness is borrowed from men who never saw the flags they helped raise, and from behind a camera. A reporter whispered, history just stood up. I want to show you one last thing, Traoré said. He clicked a remote. A simple image filled the screen. A wooden school desk split in half, nails poking out, worn smooth by hundreds of elbows and tears. This, he said, is where I first learned to read. Viewers worldwide watched in silence. I sat on the floor because there were only 2 benches for 40 children. Issued a pencil with 3 classmates. When it broke, we chewed the wood to oosic graphite inside. The camera panned the audience, some now crying openly. During recess, we didn't play. We searched for charcoal to write with that desk. It collapsed under Mifri and Isaf one day. We just laughed and kept reading. Traoré paused. Because we believe, though Tone's sentence could change a life, headed back to Trump. So no, Mr. President, I don't apologize for being bold. I apologize that it took us this long to be heard. People rose quietly to their feet, not clapping, just standing like a silent honor guard. And in a tiny village in Burkina Faso, an old school teacher whispered with tears. He remembered the desk. Trump paused. The air in the summit hall felt heavy. Even the air conditioning seemed to hum quieter now. He raised another photo, this time, of a small boy standing on a dirt path, holding a hand-sewn Burkina Faso flag made of torn cloth. His name was Dodacare, said he wasn't in. The screen zoomed in. The boy's eyes were bright, despite the dust on his skin and cracks on his lips. He followed me once as I visited a rural province. I asked him why he carried a flag. Traor's throat tightened. He said, "Because when I carry this, I feel safe. I feel like someone sees me." A hush blanketed the room. 3 weeks later, Duda was caught in crossfire during a terrorist raid. Who was holding that flag when he died? Somewhere in the room. Someone, sobbed audibly. "I buried him. Myself," Traoré said, voice, "and I gave his mother my military scarf because I had nothing else left." Togiv, he turned slowly to Trump. "So, no, I'm not too bold. I'm just carrying oath names. The world forgotten. Millions watching carried that name on a too." Traoré took a quiet step forward. Then he said something so simple, it shattered everyone in the room. He looked at Theodorus, at the cameras, at Trump and asked, "What is the value of a child in Africa?" Nobody answered. He waited. "What is one African child worth to this world?" The silence became unbearable. "You speak of economic zones, trading partnerships, military aid. But tell me, when a child dies in a desert, does your heart beat slower?" The room sat frozen. Trey raised a hand and slowly held up a photo. A girl, no older than 7, collapsed on a dry road, barefoot. Her mouth cracked from thirst. She was found 2 kilometers from her school. She collapsed on the walk home. Her name was Aminata. The screen faded to black. She alone. Trua's voice trembled, but didn't break. A single bottle of water, a meal, or even one working bicycle might have saved her. He turned to the audience. "So tell me again, what is an African child worth?" And from thousands of living rooms and phones across the world, people began crying without knowing why. Because deep inside they knew the answer, and they were ashamed of it. By now, even the world's loudest media had stopped spinning. No debates, no interruptions, no hashtags, just silence. And that silence went viral. Traoré stood still, letting it breathe. Not even the interpreter spoke. For a full 30 seconds, the summit was frozen. Delegates looked down. Cameras quivered. A child's photo lingered on the massive screen behind him. Then, finally, softly, Trump broke the silence. "I am not here for applause. I am not here to prove a point. I am here because silence has taken more African lives than any bullet." He turned slightly toward Trump one last time. "You call me too bold, but I'm not bold. I'm just tired. Tired of begging. Tired of burying. Tired of writing names on gravest of diplomas." He stepped back. "I won't raise my voice. I don't need to." Then he said it because the world is finally listening. That final line was clipped and posted within minutes. In 24 hours, it had 67 million views, and across borders, languages, and time zones, one thing became clear. A calm voice from Burkina Faso had shaken the world awake. As the summit continued, a live feed flashed across the screen. A tiny village in Burkina Faso. Children were gathered under a tree watching Traoré speak through a dusty radio. One child clutched a stick shaped like a microphone. Another balanced on a stone, pretending it was a podium. Their teacher, Mama Yaya, was wiping her eyes. She'd once taught Tro under that cemetery. "Every time he speaks," she whispered, "we listen, like we're hearing from a son." The summit hall saw it, the world. And in that moment, it wasn't about politics. It was about a village that had waited 30 years to be heard. Trump looked up at the live footage. That his face changed for the first time. His voice cracked. "That's my home," he said. "My first classroom, my first dream. And today, they finally know they mattered." The room didn't applaud. It stood not just the African leaders. Everyone. Trump said nothing, his face unreadable. And in homes, classrooms, and pews across the world, people stood too without knowing why. Maybe because they finally saw what too bold really meant. As the summit closed, leaders began packing up. Traoré walked down the stairs from the podium, quiet, composed, still calm. But then something no one expected happened. Trump stood. He looked Traoré in the eyes. For the first time, he said nothing. Instead, he extended his hand. The cameras exploded. Flashbulbs, gasps. Everyone watched as Ibrahim Traoré slowly, gracefully, reached out and shook the same hand that had insulted him. Boothis wasn't surrender. It was power under control. Strength without noise. Forgiveness with purpose. Traoré leaned in, just slightly, and said something only Trump could hear. Respect isn't given by, it's earned by truth. Trump said nothing back, but his hand, it trembled. The photo of that moment that, the front page of every news, sit within the hour. The handshake that changed everything. But for Traoré, it wasn't about the cameras. It was a boy with a flag, the girl who never made it home, the cousin who died from muddy water, and the classroom under the tree. They had all stood with him, and now so did the world. Before leaving the stage, Traoré turned one last time. No notes, no teleprompter, just truth. I didn't come here to win. I came here to speak for those who never had the chance. For every child, buried without a name. For every woman walked miles for a bucket of water. For every dreamer told to wait. He took one final breath. You called me too bold, I say. We were too silent for too long. But today, the silence ends. And with that, and the world wept. If this story touched your heart, if you cried Farah Manada, Duda, or Mama Yaya, if you believe boldness should never bezelance again, then please like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment below, saying, I stand with Traoré. Let's flood the world with voices that refuse to be quiet anymore. Someone out there needs this story right now. Share it, comment your thoughts, and tell us which moment made you cry.